Before I talk about how I got these to sprout and what worked, I want to tell you a little bit of what I tried that didn't work for me. I bought some seeds back in the winter time, and I was going to sprout them indoors and have a plant, already growing when I got ready to put stuff outside in the spring. But I tried every trick in the book. I tried scarifying the seeds, I tried soaking them, I tried keeping them warmer, I tried a little bit of everything, and absolutely nothing worked, and I got zero germination. Then, after I already had the garden growing and doing pretty well, I spotted some seeds at a pretty reasonable price. And what I ended up doing was I just started sticking the seeds in pots that I had outside. And as you can see, they're coming up. That's a banana. That's a banana. That's a banana. I think I have 4 or 5 in this pot. But they're doing really well. They've just been up for a few days, and I can already see growth in them. The little banana plants didn't get any spatial treatment, and by early October we had them growing in several pots. The ones you see here are growing in some pepper pots, and I selected a pot with 2 plants, and before the first frost I cut the pepper plant down and brought the banana plants indoors. I kept them indoors all winter under artificial lights, and if you want to know more about the lights, I'll put a link down in the description of a video I did on the lighting. This is what they look like on March 31st of the following year, and as you can see, they've grown quite a bit and are looking pretty healthy. I didn't fertilize at all during the winter. I just watered as needed. As soon as the weather allowed, I began to harden them off by taking them outside and exposing them to a little bit of sunshine and a little bit of wind and a little bit of cooler temperatures. I didn't take them outside unless I thought the temperatures were going to be in the mid-60s. And as I mentioned, I gradually exposed them to more outside time as the weather allowed. It's important not to overdo it at first when you're hardening the plants, because if you expose them to too much sunshine and wind, it can burn the leaves. So a little bit at a time, and then gradually increase. By late April, they were starting to show a little stress from the hardening off process, but by this point, they were already staying out most of the day and only brought in at night when the temperatures looked like they were going to be pretty cold. As I was getting ready to plant, I noticed that we had a little pup in this pot, so instead of 2 plants, there were suddenly 3. At this point, this plant was obviously ready to be put in a larger pot or planted in the ground, and planting in the ground is what I plan to do. This is probably the most dangerous part of this whole process for the plant. It'd be easy to break one off, so I try to be extremely careful and slowly loosen it from the pot and gradually slide it out. Once I got it out of the pot, I got a lot better look at the roots, and they were looking pretty good, and I could tell that it was starting to get just a little bit root bound, so I was glad it was time to plant. As well as the pup that had already emerged, we have another one forming, and the roots are still growing and looking pretty healthy. So now it's just a matter of splitting one of these plants off and planting it in the ground. For that, I'm going to use my Hori knife. It's a gardening tool that I use a lot, and it comes in especially handy when dividing plants. It is sharp, so you have to be careful when using one. As you can see here, it slices down through the soil and the roots without any trouble at all. I found that they're also pretty handy for transplanting small plants. You can dig out a little bit of soil without as much soil as you would with a trowel. Once I had them completely apart, it was time to dig a hole and put one of these in the ground. I dug a good-sized planting hole that wasn't too far from where I had the Musa Basjoo banana tree planted the year before. And as you can see, it's starting to come up and has quite a bit of green on it, so I figured it was pretty safe for the Musa Velutina. Since the Musa Basjoo did so well the year before, I thought it would be a good place for the Musa Velutina also, and it turned out that it worked pretty well. I mainly tried to keep the soil level even with the ground, and then I filled in around the roots with some soil that I made by mixing some store-bought potting soil with some homemade compost and a little bit of peat moss and some recycled soil. Once I had the hole mostly full, I finished filling it with the soil that came out of the hole, and then I left it somewhat loose. I didn't pack it down too much, and then once it was completely full, I gave it a good watering. If I had it to do over again, I think I would have moved a few more feet away from the Musa Basjoo, because the Musa Basjoo ended up taking up a lot of room. Even though it looks a little bit rough right here, it suffered just a little bit from the transplant shock and being outside full time, but in a week or so it recovered pretty well. And once it was settled in, I gave it a fertilizing by digging a small trench around it and then putting some balanced granular fertilizer around it, and it really started to perk up in a couple of weeks. Then once it got hot, I gave it a little bit of water every day, except when it rained. By June 12th, it still wasn't very large, but all of the new leaves looked pretty good, so it was just starting to take off. By July 8th, it was finally getting some pretty decent size, even though it was being shaded by the Musa Basjoo, which was right next to it. This is September 5th. I was doing the editing for my weekly garden update, and I noticed some color over here. That tallest banana tree there is the Musa Basjoo, and right next to it is the Musa Velutina, and we have a flower on it. I think that's just cool as heck. I've been watching it all summer, and I kind of gave up on it and forgot about it. And then I noticed that color when I was doing my editing of my garden update, and came over here, and sure enough, it's got a flower on it. I'm not sure how long it'll take to open. I'm not sure if it's going to have time to have bananas, but just having a flower is an accomplishment for me. We also have another one right next to it, but I don't know if it's going to flower. It's only been about 4 or 5 days since I first noticed this flower, and it's already changed quite a bit. With each flower petal that opens, it looks to me like it has what will be the bananas. Kind of 3 little fingers there, and then the next one that opens up has 4 more. Then let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 petals have opened, and each one looks like they have maybe little bananas forming. But it's pretty cool to see it. This is my first time for ever seeing a banana flower in person. It's been about 2 weeks since I first noticed our first flower on the Musa Velutina, and here's what it looks like now. We've got bananas. And then since then, we've had another flower open up over here, and it has bananas forming on it. And then we have a third one opening up back there. And I haven't really got back there to look at it, but I'm sure it probably has a few bananas forming on it. But I haven't counted these here, but there's probably close to a dozen. And then the flower just keeps growing up the stalk and keeps opening up. but it doesn't look like it's set on very well at the top, but it has at the bottom. Just pretty cool to look at. And while we're here, I'll just back up here so you can see the Musa Basjoo. It's probably 11 feet tall, or maybe a little more, I'm not sure. It just keeps getting taller and wider. Here's what the bananas look like on September 26th. And sadly, we ended up having a freeze before any of these bananas could ripen. But we did end up with bananas on all 3 flowers, which I thought was an accomplishment for my first try. I dug up one plant that I'm overwintering right now, and I hope to do better next season. It was a fun experience to have, and I would recommend it to anybody who's interested in banana trees. If you're just now finding this channel and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. We'll see you next time.